Hello, I just wanted to make a quick PSA about Nova with some new tech that I found recently that I don't think anyone else has found yet, at least according to my research. Mostly, the point of this is that Antimatter Drop does a blast status effect on hit, and Antimatter Drop itself does a large amount of damage. Obviously, against a level 190 Steel Path Heavy Gunner, not too interesting. But if we go ahead and just grab a few of them, it does some okay damage. Obviously, not a whole lot. The interesting thing, however, is that it is a blast status effect, and blast status effects are at their best when there's more of them. So, if you were to do a large amount of blast status effects, they would do a larger AoE, do a multiplier on the damage. Again, we can keep from start here. It's doing damage. Not a lot. So notably, we get a big blast proc from Antimatter, and we do lots of little ones with Neutron Star. And maybe you can see where this is going. You get the big status proc, immediately follow it up, immediately caps out the blast status effect, and multiplies the damage of the big one. I'll do that again quickly. So you Antimatter Drop, immediately Null Star, and they all die. Now, normally if you do a Neutron Star build, you would use something like Nourish, because Nourish adds viral to Neutron Star. See? However, you don't want to use Nourish on a build like this, because as you might see, okay, well not that time, it's been inconsistent, but viral from Nourish actually competes with the blast, and sometimes, if you're not lucky, which seems like I am getting quite lucky, and that one is live, but there we go. So, you notice it didn't fully cap the blast status effects that time, because Nourish competes with the blast. So, Nourish is actually it's still good, and when it does cap the blast status effects, it does a lot of damage, as you saw. But it does lose some consistency, and you might be better off with Eclipse, or probably better, make it more reliant on status. You probably want Raw. I know this looks very good, which really is a bit annoying when I'm trying to showcase it not working, but yeah. I would recommend something like Raw. Eclipse is also an idea if you would prefer that. Alternatively, you could do some grouping for actual missions, though you can always offset that to something like Nautilus. But yeah, that's about it. I'll show the build again. It's not a very good one, I just threw it together. There's probably ways you could make this better. I would suggest if you do use that build to get some red Archon shards for duration, so you can get more Null Stars, more blast procs, and then maybe you can more reliably use something like Nourish without worry that it will fail. But yeah, that'll be that. Thank you for watching. Okay, one thing I wanted to add very quick was some people might be wondering why you would use this over a regular Neutron Star build. And it's true that a regular Neutron Star build is generally a lot easier to use. However, it requires grouping a lot tighter than what regular enemies would usually be. So I have a pretty standard neutron star build here. High range mostly, decent strength, duration, whatnot. Normally you'd use something like Arachne, but I just have it augmented here. And what this does is if you have the enemies together, we'll do it without the enemies together first. And you see without the enemies together it's not doing a lot. Add in the Electron Prime, that'll make it a bit better. Like, but like even enemies as close as they regularly spawn, it's not enough for a neutron star build, so you definitely require enemies to be grouped for it. So you go ahead and re-equip Nautilus. Spawn in some enemies. Get nice and close. Now with them this close, it should stop it. Granted, these are very strong enemies, that's the thing. I had some weaker enemies that actually die, and then they explode like that. That's also a thing about this build, is that it requires weaker enemies to be there for the larger enemies to actually suffer. So, we wait for Nautilus to just group these back up. But it requires them to die at the end. Just for the sake of brevity, I'll take off Nautilus a sec with the still the weaker group of enemies. And you'll see it's still not quite as much as he wants them to be grouped in this build. And this is sort of the meta build a lot of people use. The other build I know about is the Molecular Prime build or something like Fenmore. That also requires them to be very, very tightly grouped. So the difference between, obviously, that and this one I've been showing, this one doesn't need any grouping, and it doesn't need weaker enemies. You just take whatever enemies you want, 20 heavy gunners, 190 steel power. Oh, I didn't have Null Star back there first. But you end their day. No matter how, as long as they're close enough to be hit by Null Star, they're close enough to die. So yeah. I hope that makes people building Nova a bit more interesting in the future. See you around.